I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We're co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We have a real treat for you today. We're going to be speaking with the great novelist, John Irving. We'll be talking about his newest book, talking about abortion rights, and why we need freedom of and from religion.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
The novelist John Irving just received FFRF's Emperor Has No Clothes Award at our recent convention. John Irving has written 14 books, including The World According to Garp and The Cider House Rules. He's won the National Book Award, the O. Henry Award. He's won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay and a Lambda Literary Award for his novel, In One Person. His best-selling novel is A Prayer for Owen Meany. Just released is The Last Chairlift, his first novel in 7 years, described as a ghost story and a love story spanning 8 decades of sexual politics.
FFRF offered the Emperor Has No Clothes Award after John Irving's column, The Long, Cruel History of the Anti-Abortion Crusade, was published by the New York Times back in June 2019. In this column, Mr. Irving wrote, "We are free to practice the religion of our choice, and we are protected from having someone else's religion practiced on us. Freedom of religion in the United States also means freedom from religion." So true. Thank you so much, John Irving, for joining us on Freethought Matters today.
Thank you.
So we do want to talk about your new book, The Last Chairlift, but before that, I would like to talk more about abortion rights. Can you talk a little bit about all the ground that we've lost in the United States since you wrote that column 3 years ago?
I never felt that Roe versus Wade was safe, or I never felt it would be safe. Even when it was new, I believe that my friends who believed that abortion rights were now a done deal were kidding themselves, and we had to stand on guard. We had to watch out. The Supreme Court's overturning of Roe, what those Republican justices did is so much more in step with the Vatican than it is with the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, that part that says, make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Those Republican justices on the court have done exactly that.
So, and I love the fact that your column, that column 3 years ago, talked about the cruelty of the anti-abortion movement.
It reminds me of the Reagan years, when Reagan's moral absenteeism was so apparent in his denial of the AIDS epidemic, which for 6 years of his presidency he didn't even speak of. But during all that time, he bitterly complained about Roe versus Wade, and that the rights to life granted to the unborn by our Creator, Reagan said, were being denied. Well, the religious right, as they were called in Reagan's time, the moral majority, they've not gone away. And it was Reagan who embraced those social conservatives and brought them into the Republican Party. And the Republican Party now is inseparable from that social conservatism.
I just reread your Cider House Rules, and I was so struck not only by your detailed medical knowledge, but what a compassionate affirmation it really is for the need for choice for safe abortion care. How did you come to write that book?
Well, I thought it was a good time for an historical novel to remind readers what it was like when that procedure was unsafe and illegal. I thought it was essential to say, if you're missing, or you think you're missing when abortion was illegal, look at everything that happens in this story, because it could only happen at a time when that procedure was illegal and unsafe. And so many young women were faced with the prospect of mandatory childbirth or an unsafe abortion. It was my way of saying, do you really think you want to bring this back? Well, they have.
Yes, they have. It was very bittersweet to reread it after that. Just one more question about this book. Is the St. Cloud's orphanage based on real life?
No, but there were many orphanages in New England at that time. And all of those orphanages had to face the prospect of what to do about that procedure, because the women who came there to give up their babies, to have their babies and leave them behind, were not the only women who went there. There were women who went there in the first trimester and said, please, do I have to have this baby? Because they rightly suspected that if there was a physician who was sympathetic, at risk to his own profession, to losing his license, to facing a fine and jail, if there was anyone who might risk that procedure, a physician in an orphanage would know what state those women were in who came there to have babies and walk away. They knew better than anyone.
We can see that Oscar award behind you there. Was that for Cider House Rules?
Yes. Wow. Yes, it was.
Now, you've said that the United States is, what you say is we're sexually backward. Is the fact that we are a sexually punitive nation what has fueled some of your writing?
Certainly. But it's ironic, given the reputation that those separatist Puritans who settled the United States, who came to Plymouth, Massachusetts in the 1600s, it's ironic that they were fleeing religious persecution in England. And the reputation, of course, that the Puritans have among most Americans is how strictly religious they were, not about abortion. For more than 2 centuries, abortion was allowed, beginning in the 1620s. It was permitted through the first trimester. So our founding fathers, those deeply religious separatist Puritans, understood that that decision belonged to a pregnant woman and to no one else. It was between the women who were pregnant and the midwives, and the matter was settled. Abortion, if you look at American history and the history of abortion in the United States, many Americans don't know this, but abortion was legal in the United States. For 2 centuries, it was scarcely illegal for 1. So that most Americans think legal abortion began with Roe versus Wade. No, illegal abortion didn't get started until the 1840s and didn't become illegal in all of the United States until 1900.
Well, let's hope Justice Alito is watching this program because he got his facts wrong.
I don't think Justice Alito is so concerned with facts. If they could overlook the First Amendment to the Constitution, what else could they overlook?
Well, your books certainly address this issue and many of these issues with real passion. In fact, when one of our friends found out that we were going to be interviewing you on this show, she told us that she read The World According to Garp in high school, and she says that book changed her life. I mean, that's high praise for a novelist, that you would write something that would have such an impact emotionally and socially on someone's life.
It's hard to imagine now, but at the time I was writing that book, and shortly before it published, I naively imagined that by the time The World According to Garp was published, the mainstream of the sexual intolerance I was writing about would have already become passé, and that World According to Garp would look like a historical novel in its own time. Sadly not. Before I began The Last Chairlift, which I began in December of 2016, I wrote 5 episodes for the TV series in development of The World According to Garp. Just 5 episodes. I told Warner Brothers I don't want to be the head writer, but let these episodes be a guide to whoever your head writer is, and let him or her do with them what he or she chooses to do. I'll consult with whoever that is. But these are the last scripts I want to write. But sadly, part of me feels that one reason that television series appears to be, we don't know, it appears to be on track to be made, is, I think, how unhappily relevant it still is. Look at the number of Republican legislators in the US now who are banning books in schools and libraries about the abortion subject, about everything to do with the LGBTQ community. And one can only imagine in the latter case, think of what they're doing by banning books on the LGBTQ subject to young people of high school age. Think what that does to young gay, lesbian, and trans kids who already feel isolated and alone as it is. And now you're going to deny them access to literature about who they are? That goes back to the word cruelty, which we've talked about.
Of course, if you are a young person, what books do you want to read? But the books that were banned, you're told not to read those books.
Exactly.
So before we leave Garp, in the novel, Garp is not overly friendly toward religion. In fact, there's a line in there that he writes to one of his critics where he says, "Laughter is my religion." Is that true for you, too, the novelist?
Having just spent 6 years writing a ghost story, and people have been asking me why ghosts. The best thing I can say is that for a non-religious person, ghosts have been, as far as I can credibly venture, into the spiritual world. I've known many friends rational, reasonable people who've had ghost sighting experiences. I haven't, but they're credible to me. Ghosts are credible. That's as big a step as I will admit to the existence of a world of the spirit.
So we are speaking with novelist John Irving, and when we come back, we would like to ask you to tell us more about your newest book, The Last Chairlift.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed, as you may be, by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I'm grateful for this award from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. You are a foundation of which I heartily approve. The Pope was in Canada to apologize for Christianity's role in colonization. If I'd been in Edmonton, I wouldn't have been allowed within speaking distance of the Pope Mobile. But I would respectfully like to ask Pope Francis if he has any plans to apologize to a great many non-religious Americans. I would like to tell Pope Francis that his acolytes on the US Supreme Court have imposed a papal definition of right to life on the rest of us. But think about this. Why would Pope Francis apologize? What's happened in the United States is what the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church and many evangelical churches have long sought, namely, to impose their doctrinal beliefs on all of us.
And that was the novelist John Irving giving his Emperor Has No Clothes Award acceptance speech at our recent national convention. John Irving is the author of The World According to Garp, The Cider House Rules, A Prayer for Owen Meany, and so many other books. His newest book, The Last Chairlift, just came out. So, Mr. Irving, what is this new book about?
It's what I would call one of my family saga novels. It's about an extended family, a New England family, and it follows their story, a love story, a ghost story, through 80 years of sexual politics. The premise of the story will seem familiar to many of my readers. There's a somewhat elusive mother. There's a missing biological father. This will certainly seem familiar. A familiar premise I've begun with before. What's different is that in this extended family, the only straight character is the narrator. Everyone in his family is queer, so that in his family, he's the queer one in the sense of the odd one. In this family, he's the odd man out. Queer is normal in this family. He's the one who puzzles them all. And understandably, I think, his sexual behavior is the worst of all of them. they're all better behaved than he is. And they're a very loving family. And my point is that I wanted to change the rules about what was normative and what was strange. And I thought it was time that the straight guy in the family was the last one to learn, the slow learner, and everyone else was looking out for him.
Sounds like you want to give Governor Abbott another book to ban.
Yes. Governor Abbott needs a little inspiration from me. I'm pulling for Beto O'Rourke. Go Beto. Beat the pants off Governor Abbott. Yes, please.
So we have to say we're nonpartisan, but in the last chairlift you write, loved ones leave us and we go on. Ghosts or no ghosts, we still see them. I believe you're now 80 years old, although you do not look it. Loss becomes such a big part of aging, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's at my age, you realize that many of your school friends, many of the kids you grew up with, the people you went to high school with, the people you went to college with, in my case, more than half of them are gone, and it's and given my generation, thinking of the friends I lost because of the Vietnam War, because of AIDS, there were already losses along the way.
So you say you are a non-believer. Were you always that way? Were you raised religious?
I had a very liberal family, and they did, I think, what many liberal families did. They took us to church. The church in my family changed because when my mother remarried, when I was 6, my stepfather was an Episcopalian, and my mother and her family had always been Congregationalists. So as we switched from the Congregational church to the Episcopal church, and I was very interested in the differences in the service, curious about it. But in my family, by the time you were a teenager, nobody expected you or asked you to go to church anymore. It was your own choice whether you did or you didn't. Although I attended a non-denominational boarding school, there was nonetheless a requirement that you attend some religious service on the weekend, depending on what you were. I mean, the Jewish kids went off to their Saturday services. Everyone went to the churches they'd grown up with. And there was a kind of non-denominational Protestant church on campus for the students who couldn't be bothered to choose to go somewhere in the town. Most of us who wanted more of the weekend to ourselves and didn't care about going to church at all, we chose the Catholic Church because you could always go to the first Mass of the morning, which was really fast, and then it was over with quickly. So I felt a little badly for the Catholic Church in the town of Exeter because there were so many academy boys who weren't not only not Catholic, but not religious at all, but we all went there because it was over in a bang.
Well, this is, I'm afraid, our last question. I am curious, Mr. Irving, and also a bit envious about the fact that you happen to hold 2 citizenships, one Canadian, which is where you live now, and one American. How did that happen?
It's a love story, not a political story. My wife is Canadian. She was the Canadian publisher of the Cider House Rules when we first met. At that time, I had custody of two children from a previous marriage. They were still going to school in the United States, and she understood that I couldn't move to Canada because I was looking after these two boys. Well, so she moved to the United States. She became a U.S. citizen. She went to work there. Those boys went on to college and to their adult lives. By that time, Janet and I had a child of our own, and that child already had attachments to American schools. So until the last of the children was done school and college and had a life of his or her own, we stayed in the United States. And as soon as we were free to go to a place of choice, well, I'd been coming to Toronto for 3 or 4 months of the year, every year for 30 years. And I loved Toronto. So we moved here full time in 2014, 2015, and I became a Canadian citizen in 2019. I'm happy to live here. But I have 4 grandchildren and two children and a stepdad and brothers and sisters who all live in the States. So I'm very connected to the States, and I did not want to give up my U.S. citizenship because I, excuse me, I intend to keep voting.
Yes.
In the U.S. I don't want to give that up.
We need your vote and we need your voice, and we are so grateful that you joined us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.